So I guess that's me first. So good evening, everyone. It's so exciting to be with you all and talk about the EPL experience. My name is Julia Crusoe, and I just graduated with the Corona cohort in spring 2020. I was originally was in the on-campus program, but with the help of people like Emily and some of the amazing staff at the program, I was able to transition online when that was better equipped for my lifestyle and what I was dealing with. At the time, I am currently a 6th grade RELA teacher for Prince George's County Public Schools at Oxon Hill Middle, where I serve as the 6th grade chair, as well as this year recently, thanks to the EPL program, I was able to receive the reading department chair position as well. So I'm super excited to be here with you all tonight. I'm looking forward to hearing about the other alum.
Hi, my name is Liz Brown. I am a fall 2019 online cohort graduate from the EPL program. I serve as the director of STEM initiatives, and I also teach chemistry at Tower Hill School, which is in Wilmington, Delaware. It's a small independent school here in the city. And I transitioned into this job of director of STEM initiatives this summer, so after finishing the EPL program, but I still continue to have a full teaching load as well.
Hi, I'm Don Taylor, graduate of fall of 2019 cohort. I am the Director of Talent Recruitment for Uncommon Schools, which is a network of about 55 public charter schools in New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. I'm excited to be here to share a little bit about my experience.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Akiyama. I taught for a few years in PG County at Thomas Stone Elementary School. While doing the in-person EPL program. And I moved back to California, where I'm originally from, taught for a few years and transitioned into the principal role at my site in May. So it's been a hectic few months and a school leader born out of a global pandemic, but excited to be here.
Hi, y'all. My name is Sean Worley. I am a senior policy associate with Education Council. I'm from the fall 2017 on-campus cohort. With Education Council, we are a mission-driven education policy consulting firm really focused on educational equity across all sectors of education, anything from early childhood through higher education. I specifically have a portfolio very focused on all things federal, so federal education policy, with a particular focus on LGBTQ student initiatives and creating better spaces for them.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. It's so great to hear a little more about yourselves, and I'm excited to get to know more. So the first question is, why did you decide to pursue a degree in education policy and leadership, and why American University? And feel free for anyone to go ahead and start us off.
I'll jump in. So for me, I always knew that I wanted to do school pretty much kind of back to back to back. And so when it came time to make the decision on whether or not I was going to pursue a secondary degree on top of my bachelor's, I realized that Teach for America, I'm a Teach for America alum, they had a partnership with American U. And so financially, it was very pleasing to me, but also I'm from the DMV area. I was born and raised. I was born in Washington, D.C., and I lived most of my life in Prince George's County, Maryland. So it fit with my life. I knew the area, I knew the school, and the online program and the coursework really seemed to align with where I wanted to go career-wise. So that's pretty much why I picked it, and why I decided to go online was just because it was much easier for me to be able to take classes from home. I tried commuting, and because of the time that I got off work, even though my professors were super gracious because they too are grown adults, like I was late, and I didn't like that because as a teacher, I don't want people late in my class either. So I made the transition, and I'm very happy with the decision that I made.
Similar to Julia, I was also I am a Teach for America alum. I was a 2013 core member in Sacramento, California. So unlike Jeremy, he went back to California. I went from California to DC. It's where I am now. And for me, going into the classroom, I had a sense that I wanted to do policy at some point, skip ahead after 5 years in the classroom, realizing I should probably start working on that and figuring out what that means. And so American's program really provided what I was looking for in not only the tools necessary to enter into the policy sphere, but to also just learn more about what education policy meant. What does that mean at the district level? What does that mean at the school level? What does that mean at the federal level, which is where I am now? So it really provided kind of that overview and really helped define my carving out in the education world.
I'll jump on the Teach for America train, fall 2013 core member of Metro Atlanta. I joined the program, for two reasons. I was looking for it to get out of the classroom. By looking, I wasn't like running, but I was looking for an opportunity to kind of expand my impact outside of the classroom. And as I thought about kind of what that pivot would look like, I knew I wanted to kind of expand my content knowledge to supplement my experience. And so my wife decided she wanted to pursue an MBA, and I decided when we moved to New York. And so this program provided the flexibility for me to continue to work while she pursued her MBA full time. And so this gave me the content knowledge I felt like I needed to stay within the education space, particularly as a person who is managing talent for a large charter network. I feel like the program provided a lot and helped me to advance in my career, even during the time that I was a student on the online program.
So I am not a Teach for America alum, so I may be the only one. I come from a very non-traditional teaching background, which is why I chose American. My background is in scientific research. I have an advanced degree in science, and I was working in labs and knew I wanted to transition to teaching, and I went into independent private school teaching because I didn't have a certification in teaching. And I, at that point in my life, wasn't ready to go back and get a certification. I had done a lot of work. I was an adult and I was married, and I was like, I'm not going back to school. 5 years later, I went back to school because I was in the classroom and realized that I really didn't have any content knowledge around the science of teaching. You know, what does it mean to really be a teacher? What does it mean to be enmeshed in the world of education and to understand the challenges that are facing students and facing educators? And so I wanted to be remote because I was teaching full time. So the online program was wonderful for that, but it also just gave me a perspective that I didn't have because I was a public school student for my entire life, but then, you know, that doesn't really teach you what it's like to be an educator in that world. So American was great for that.
Great, thank you all. We're gonna move on to the next question. So can you please tell us about your journey from American University to your current job? And how did you figure out what career pathway to take after graduation?
I think it was a little challenging for me. With American, I really enjoyed having the opportunity to meet with other educators, but still do things around policy, of course, being in DC. And I wanted to take advantage of, you know, the summer internship at Ed Council and to work with organizations in DC. And it was not an experience that I had as a teacher, and it was super different. And I think I shifted in some sense, returning back to California, continuing to teach. But I do think that, you know, the background in particularly special education law, school funding and policy has really lent itself well to what I'm experiencing as a school leader and as a principal. It's not something that I expected entirely, but it certainly has supported, you know, my background and what I'm passionate about. And in this role, I get to do a little bit of both, you know, still being on the ground kind of since we're remote. And I actually haven't been in this role on site, but I certainly the policy aspect and budget and things around COVID and all of that has definitely been influenced by, you know, graduate school and being able to have opportunities to experience that.
I think for me, I really tried to find and take advantage of every opportunity I could just to learn about the different roles that policy plays in education. So when I was with DC Public Schools, while I was in the program, I tried to find opportunities with the district to get a sense of how policy is made and implemented there. I realized that's not for me. And then during the program in an off summer, I spent some time with the House Education and Labor Committee. And that's really when I learned for myself that federal education policy is something that I wanted to do and really wanted to invest my time. And And that experience not only really connected me to a lot of people, and so I used that opportunity to network with individuals that I worked with or others on the Hill at the time, but it really shaped my understanding of how I wanted to move forward in this work. And so it helped me target my job search during kind of the winter of my graduation and going into the end of the school year. So knowing I was looking for job opportunities that were very focused on federal education, whether those be with congressional offices, which I applied for, or with consulting firms or with nonprofits, but I knew I wanted to do something federally facing. And those opportunities that I took during the program really helped inform that.
I stay with my current employer, so much of my role didn't change.
I would say the same thing. I'm still in the same school system, but I do feel that the program, well, it allowed me to get a promotion and a pay raise. So, because if you're a teacher, you all know all about the scales. But it did kind of give me the push that I needed on paper, honestly, to say that I knew what I was talking about, and kind of combined with the years of service that I've had in the classroom to be able to move into leadership, which was my goal. Because like Don, I'm trying to get out the classroom. It was a jog and now it's more of like a sprint. But I still want to be school-based. And so that's why I chose this particular program, because I knew it would give me the knowledge I needed at the leadership level, but I would still have the content and the pedagogy and the coursework to stay within a building and be valuable to a school system.
Julia, you're actually hitting on my next question, so maybe you can build off of that. So what content and skills did you learn at AU help prepare you for your current job?
The biggest skill that I think that I took away in what I do now is data analysis. That statistics class, whoa boy. I am not a math teacher. If you ever hear me talking, my students know I say Ms. Crusoe teaches the reading. So that was a huge challenge, but the way in which we looked at data and the way we were able to break down, it's been so impactful for me as a department chair, because I'm having to look at data across kids and help tailor instruction and provide feedback to educators. And as one of the younger people in my building, coming into the role from someone that was a bit more established with tenure and taking over for her, that was one of the ways that I was able to kind of throw my weight around, was to be able to have these data-driven conversations with the educators. And it really kind of allowed them to respect me, because I wasn't just saying like, this is what I think. I was able to really take their data, flip it for them. Also just, I think working with adults, there's a lot of project-based work in this program. And for me as a teacher, and I think those of my fellow teacher panelists, like you go into teaching for the kids and not necessarily for the big people. And so transitioning into a role where now I had to spend a lot of time with adults, and that's just something that I wasn't really comfortable with, being in this program and having to work with others, working with other people's time, was really invaluable to me as I was able to transition into the role that I'm in now.
I would say that I took two courses actually. My last semester, I took the nonprofit management in the education sector, and I also did the pro seminar. And I think one of the skills that I developed the most in both of those classes were the consultative skills. I think because of the engagement that I had with other organizations who were in the education sector, and my ability to be able to learn from what they were doing, but also I did my pro seminar project on the organization I currently work for. I got an opportunity to get a deeper dive into some of the policies that exist, some of the ways that we make the decisions and the decision makers. And my role has become a lot more cross-functional. And so now I'm able to really contribute to some of the conversations that are happening at a higher level. And I'm able to kind of leverage those consultative skills that I built to kind of provide a voice in the room that may not have been previously there.
Dawn, I actually want to cut in here real quick. We have a few people on the call that might not know what the pro seminar course is. Would you mind elaborating on that and kind of talking more about your experience real quick?
Sure. So the pro seminar course is an opportunity for you to work with an organization, a nonprofit organization, or private, well, I guess not just nonprofit, but work with an organization who is in government policy, particularly education policy, who is working in nonprofit. Maybe they're working with kids, maybe they work on public policy. I had an opportunity to work with Teach Plus, and I helped them to figure out, well, not figure out, but like I helped to support teachers who are trying to figure out how to write policy around teacher education, like professional development, but also diversifying the teaching profession. And so it was as a person who actually recruits teachers and who's committed to developing diverse staff, it was a really good opportunity for me to understand policy at the national landscape because of the research that was at my disposal through Teach Plus. But it was also an opportunity for me to kind of hone my own skills and understanding around how that could be replicated or how it could support the work that I was doing in my current job.
Great, thank you. And I do want to give the other panels a chance to answer this question before we move on, is what content and skills that you learned at AU help prepare you for your job? No pressure to answer, but want to give you all a chance.
Yeah, I think Jason Snyder's education law class was probably my favorite. It allowed me to like be in a 1L environment, which is not something that I'd experienced. And then also dive into a specific case law that it really is the bedrock and foundation of, SPED, student rights and things like that have certainly, I don't know, given context, I guess, to why we do what we do in the classroom and why it matters and how things at a national level in policy actually changes how we operate at a school site level was really impactful. I also think it just, not having the chance to like explore education academically in undergrad allowed me to stretch my own thinking, see education in a really different way. And I recall it's probably a group of 20 or 30 teachers. And we were trying to examine the first case he had us look at. And we kind of went in thinking, we understood it, that we could read an argument or read informational writing and just, I don't know, kind of remember feeling like we were taught very quickly that we didn't know a lot of things, and the way to read ed law and just case law was really different. And I think academically it was a different experience than I had previously.
I think the thing that surprised me the most was actually that I don't work so much in policy. I work more in leadership, and it was the soft skills that I take with me every day, and I don't realize it until I've used them. Like I kind of do something, look back and go, oh, I learned that, and okay, I applied it. So one of them was actually the job that I'm in right now. I had the chance to actually create for myself after I finished this program, and part of that was writing up a whole multi-year proposal for what this program was going to look like, and that was almost directly related to one of the leadership courses we took, I think in the second to last semester, where we had to create our own learning culture. And it was this very in-depth multi-stage project where we were going from student learning culture to adult learning culture to the entire school from top to bottom. And thinking on that kind of macro and micro level at the same time really helped me to propose the job I'm in right now, and also look back to make sure that I am meeting the milestones that I claimed I'm going to. And then also how to troubleshoot when I'm running into something that I can't figure out on my own. So those skills I think were invaluable, but then also it's the skills that I may not use every day that I just had a great time. I thought ed law was fantastic. I love math, economics was wonderful, statistics, I felt like duck in water. It just made me really happy. So I guess the point is there are lots of things in this program that even if you don't use every single day, you enjoy learning, and it just stretches you in a way that you might not have realized coming in. I didn't think that I could get excited about law, but in fact I did. So there's stuff that's just really great intellectually, and to have a cohort to go through it with it is also really wonderful.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much. So the next question is, what is the biggest challenge in the education policy field at the moment? And how does this directly or indirectly affect you in your current role?
I think for everybody would be to navigate the situation that we're in with the digital learning. And I'm sure that, we have principals on the call, we have, school leaders, organization leaders, but it's hard. It is very hard doing this work because school is designed to be done in person. There is outside of the academic component, there is a social component to school, and the way that it is made up really fosters the learning, and also the fact that children are in front of you and that that whole element has been removed. So I think really with policy, it's finding a way to make sure that the level of education is being maintained, even though the environment is changing. And that's something that I think we're working on as a whole. I think every school leader is trying to figure out how do we get kids engaged, how do we get them involved. I know for us, attendance is a huge issue because before it's very noticeable when a child doesn't show up to school, but when you're on Zoom with hundreds of children every day, they can kind of slip through the cracks. And what I've seen with some of my team is like, I had a teacher who didn't know a kid was gone for like 10 days and I couldn't even really feel bad for her because in a physical environment, you would notice and miss the presence of that child. And also, there's so many other things we have in place. Like we can't really use PPW workers the same because COVID, like we can't, do house visits unless it's absolutely necessary or if there's like danger. So just, I think policies that help us navigate situations like this because obviously we don't really have an end in sight for what this might be. And we don't know when this could happen again and what we might need to utilize this particular structure for. So I think that's really, not to say obviously, but an issue, but more so in the face of how do we make sure that education can be maintained in different settings, whether it's because of a global pandemic or because of, any reason why children might need to be out of the environment. So.
I completely agree. And I think there's also subject specific challenges. So I teach high school, but I teach science, which is inherently a hands-on subject. And it's also a group subject. You work with a lab partner, you don't work by yourself, and you share materials and you share space. And not being able to do that in person has really forced me to explore education technology in a way that I never thought I would. And I think that what I'm struggling with most is not knowing what's out there. There doesn't appear to be a repository of content. That was something that if someone's out there and wants to do that, that's a really good thing to focus on right now. But also the quality and the standards that you're looking for. You can find a lot of stuff, but it's not necessarily what it rises to your standard of what you want in your classroom. And so it's a time challenge. I think there is just the sheer amount of time that we are putting into trying to teach remotely or hybrid or whatever it is you're doing, eats into the quality of the work that we do because there is just so many hours in a day and there's so much energy that one can expend on things before diminishing returns. And so I'm thinking, yes, the policy of are we in school or not, but also I think teacher support is something that I'd like to see focused on as well during this. Understandably, we're focused on students and we should be. But if your teacher's not supported and in a good place, then your children are not going to be either. So I do think that we're lacking a little bit of that. And that's something that we haven't really yet talked about at a larger level.
So I would say +1 to that, and kudos to you all for navigating the challenges of the pandemic and working to support students in your schools as best as possible during this time. And then I would say, and I think something that, particularly from my perspective at the federal level, that is one of the biggest challenges, I think, is we exist in a society that has a very decentralized education system. A lot of the responsibility and a lot of the decision-making authority is delegated to the states and even more so to local districts. And I say that not because I'm sure that's something that you all don't know, but because I think it relates to the fact that we are currently facing, due to the pandemic, but also due to the needed reckoning that we're going through as a nation when it comes to racial justice and the perpetuation of racial injustice, is that when those local decisions don't attend to the needs of students of color, the needs of students from low-income communities, the needs of migrant students, how can other bigger systems step in and address those needs? And it's a challenge and it's a tension, it's political, and it's a difficult conversation at all levels. But I think it is a conversation that is it's brought to the conscious so much more than usual because of what we're seeing with the pandemic, with the perpetuation of systemic racism, is how can we address these disparities from bigger levels when our systems are not designed to do that.
I think from a talent perspective, I think I probably would have said COVID as a number one. I think if I had to just pick a number two, three, I would say funding being one. I think I've seen so many of my peers have we've been fortunate as an organization at Uncommon to not have to do any layoffs. Many of the districts surrounding us have laid off thousands of teachers. And so I know that's a direct correlation to the funding as a result of COVID. But I think those two things, in addition to already being in a national teacher shortage, has exacerbated with what's already a really big problem.
Thank you all so much. And I, echo sentiments of Sean. Thank you to our educators who are on the call with us right now. I cannot imagine how difficult it is in the classroom if you're online, hybrid, and supporting our students, especially with what's going on in our nation, because there is a lot. there is a lot going on. So thank you all so much. And we appreciate your time also for everyone being on this call. So going on to the next question, what advice do you have for current students, even prospective students, about networking and preparing for the career search while they are in the program?
I would absolutely tell students to really take advantage of your professors. Sometimes I think when you're in grad school, you think like, oh, this isn't like undergrad, or like, in undergrad, you kind of feel like a fish in the sea because you're taking these huge art classes, but these professors do care about the students in their cohorts. I actually used one of the professors from the program, Professor Jennifer Steele. She was one of my recommendations for the doctoral program that I just got accepted to. And they noted in my application acceptance that her recommendation was one of the leading factors because of how she spoke about my time with her in the program and things like that. So that is the hugest resource because you'll never know when you need them. And for the program I applied for, I specifically needed an academic recommendation from my graduate program. And in speaking to a lot of my cohort members, they were like, well, I'm glad you got cool with her, because they couldn't think in that moment who they would reach out to need that. But also utilize the people. You're gonna meet an amazing group of adults. I still talk to the women in my cohort when I got accepted today. We have a little group chat and they were like, yes, and because we spent 2.5 years together, and so take the time. It is a singular thing because you are getting your degree and you can sometimes kind of get laser focused, but take the time to get to know people because, oh, thank you, Emily. Get to know these people because they can become resources for you. If you move into another area, one of my cohort members moved up here and I helped her kind of navigate the school systems up here to get a job because I had lived here and I knew some people. And if we hadn't connected, she might not have had that resource. So I would just say really take advantage of your human capital and don't get so caught up in the classes and the coursework, because once it's all said and done, you want to have, you got your fancy, expensive piece of paper, but you want to have the resources and the people that you can go back to build on your career.
I would echo that completely. Also, Julia, congratulations on your acceptance. That's a huge accomplishment. I think related to networking is think about networking not only to learn about what you want to do, but about what you don't want to do. So think about professors or think about people that your professors bring in. It may be something that you don't think you're interested in, and it may actually be what you want to do. So think about it that way as well. And then one very, very concrete piece of advice that I would offer to everyone is when you do network and when you set up those conversations, always end those conversations by asking, do you have any recommendations for who else I can talk to? And would you mind connecting me to them? Networking is literally a spider's web. And so you're just trying to build connection after connection to not only learn more, but ultimately to land you in where you want to go further.
That's great advice. I have two things. One, to the point about courses, I talked about the pro seminar course earlier. I think that's a really great opportunity because you can actually get an opportunity, if you can, to find an organization that you want to work with, or American can help find one for you based on partnerships that they have. And so if you know that you've wanted to work for lack of what I'm gonna say, if you know you've wanted to work for Teach for America, find someone who works at Teach for America, reach out to them either via LinkedIn or just info@Teach for America, to see if you can complete your pro seminar course at that organization. The second thing I would say is don't underestimate a cold message on like LinkedIn. People, I think you have the advantage of saying, I'm a student and I want to work, I want to learn. Like people love to engage students. And so I would say, find the person who's in the role that you want, who's in the field that you want, and like send them a cold message on LinkedIn, just expressing interest to talk to them about what they're doing or ask questions about how you can get in their field. As we all know, people love to talk about themselves.
I think that's all amazing, great advice. And, you know, something that was told to me about networking is that it's really scary. It can seem so intimidating to reach out to someone that you've never talked to before, you have never met them before, and reaching out to them can be scary. Like, what if they say no? But that's the great thing is that's the worst case scenario, right? The worst case scenario is that they're going to say no. And the best thing is most people, like Don said, they want to talk about themselves. They want to talk about their accomplishments. They want to pass on this knowledge. You know, you are the future. They recognize that your students are growing. So, you know, don't be afraid to reach out. The worst thing they can say is no. All right, so the next question is going to be.
I'm sorry, and if they say no, because people are busy, so if because I've got 1,000 messages that I still haven't responded to, just send a follow-up message maybe a week later to say, hey, just reaching out again, wanted to follow up on my last message. Honestly, you might have to send a third message. People like persistence. I'm just being transparent. People like persistence. And so even if they say no, or reach out to somebody else. I would also just add, I'm sorry, and I don't want to usurp this, but sometimes sometimes people like to reach out to the CEO or the executive director. Some advice someone gave me once is like, reach out to tomorrow's CEO. So like reach out to the program manager, reach out to the deputy director, reach out to the special assistant to the CEO, right? Like these are the people who are the gatekeepers and can honestly get you in.
I have to second Don on that. I'm sorry, because a part of my pro seminar, one of my classes was working with a company directly and kind of seeing their management styles. And I ended up getting to talk to the CEO, who was actually the founder of the organization, because I reached out to some of the lower level leadership staff and my conversations with them and my interest in what they did. And they were like, yeah, I actually want to put you in front of our CEO. And it ended up with, you know, possible job opportunities and things like that. Literally him saying like, when you finish your program, if you want to leave the building, if you want to leave your school. So like I cannot express like, because it makes them feel good too, because people always want to jump over them. But honestly, like for those of us that work in leadership, like, especially if you worked your way up leadership, mostly like I know a lot of the day-to-day stuff that my principal does. Like, and I love my, but because I'm in the classrooms, I'm with the teachers, and I'm sure, Jeremy, you can speak, like you have staff that work for you that probably would be able to get a question quicker on something day to day than you would, because you're always thinking so big picture. You're thinking of the whole school, you're thinking of that. And those people, especially they see something in you, they'll get you to that higher person if they find you valuable, which 9 times out of 10 you are, because I mean, you're here, so.
Yeah, sure.
Related to that, you also never know who's on a hiring committee, especially if it's an organization that's smaller. They oftentimes use as many people on the team as possible. So anyone from a program assistant to, like Don said, like a special assistant, you just never know who's ultimately going to make that decision. It's usually not the CEO who's making those decisions at that point.
Yeah, and people also really value the voice of teachers. And in kind of that pro seminar course, like I worked on a project, I guess, with Education Council, and it was really like folks shared, like intimidating to be in a space with lawyers or just a fancy office. And I was used to my classroom in PG County with no air conditioning, and it was just very, very different. But also at the same time, people really value the voice of teachers, and it's not something that I think a lot of policy folks actually hear, whether on the Hill or in an organization or even at education nonprofits. And even at a principal level, it's really easy to get disconnected to what teachers are doing day to day, especially even in distance learning. And so I think valuing that and knowing that teachers, I think, have the hardest job no matter what, especially now, and using that, you know, to your advantage to share a perspective that no one else has from what you experience today in your classroom. and using that to fuel a job opportunity or to reground yourself, and actually really kind of rework to ground other folks who aren't in the classroom into what your actual experiences are, because I think that's where the value added comes from.
I'm sorry, can I just say one more thing? Because I want to pick back what Jeremy just said.
Of course.
So when I pivoted from the classroom, when we moved to New York, I had this fear of people are just going to look at my resume and say, oh, he's just a teacher. I had this fear that people weren't going to see transferable skills. I had this fear that it was just going to be difficult for me to pivot out of the classroom. And I honestly think this degree was a part of that fear. It was a part of me saying, I need something to supplement my experience so that people can see value. And what I've learned now in my experience is that there are so many skills that you develop as a teacher. There is so much that you know as a practitioner that, to Jeremy's point, that people don't know, and people value your perspective. What is going to be critical for those people who may have that same fear is finding someone who can support you in creating a resume that outlines those skills in a way that doesn't show just a teacher. And so I think that is going to be extremely important for those people who are trying to pivot out of the classroom into who are trying to pivot out of the classroom.
Julia, do you want to add anything to that? I saw you nodding in agreement. You're very animated. No, that's pressure for you.
No, I think that is so true. Especially in people really, especially people that get out of the classroom. So I'm so happy to hear that you understand that, because I think when you're in high level leadership, you have to remember what it was like to be in the room. But also being a teacher, there's so many ways that you can write a resume to really expand upon what you do. Because if I think about the amount of things that I have to do in order to, so I always tell people, teachers have two jobs: the job I have to do at home to do the job I have to do in front of my students. And that's, data collection, analysis, planning, forward, long range planning. Teachers are some of the most organized individuals I know, because we have to know what we're doing 10 days ahead to have room to pivot and move and catch for a snow day, or here's testing, or here's coronavirus, right? So I think it's when you really think about, I try to always get my team, especially when I get new teachers on my team, and they're trying to pivot into different things. It's look at the things you do. And if you didn't teach, it's all in the wording. Did you plan a lesson, or did you organize, an instructional pattern from a curriculum? It's all in the wording to add value to yourself. But I got excited because I think it's you can't underestimate yourself, especially when you're trying to leave the classroom. And I was just I was if I'm going to get this degree, but as I was through the program, I realized I didn't need the degree. The degree is a very nice additive, but I had it all along. That's why I was able to compete and complete the program. You won't be able to get through a program like this because it is rigorous. I mean, it is a highly academic program, but I think you should know as soon as you get accepted, you have what it takes and you're more than worthy. And this is just allowing you to highlight and fine tune those skills so you can get in those rooms. And it does help, but I really want people to know teachers are truly undervalued, but don't allow the fact that other people undervalue your profession to have you think anything less about yourself. Because that's something I had to learn early on. I have friends who are lawyers, I have friends who are doctors, and sometimes you can be well, I teach kids. But every profession needs a teacher. Everything that everybody's doing and needs a teacher. And so I just want to say that to whoever's on this call, you are, remember that. And everything you do is just kind of the cherry on top. It's not the base. You're the base because you're doing that work every day.
Oh, that's such great advice. Makes me just I love that. I'm going to start saying that to myself all the time. It's I am the base. I'm not the cherry on top. I love that. So we're going to go into our last question. Then we are going to have time to do some Q&A. So the last question is going to be, What has helped you to get where you are? And what advice would you have for others who want to set off in a similar direction?
I think that the thing that has helped me is kind of jumping off what Julia said, and I was very quiet in the last panel because I am the world's worst networker, and so thank you all for that advice. I'm going to go like write it down and do it tomorrow. I have nothing to offer in that area, but I think that what Julia was getting at in having a conviction in yourself, and I think it also comes from having a passion in what you do. I know that for everyone, science education and STEM is not their jam, but it's mine. And so I can carve a hole where I see the opening, because it's not something that everybody has the background in, nor is it something everybody has the interest in. And so I think that inserting myself in a place where I saw an opening was what got me where I am now. I said, this is lacking, and I'm going to tell you how I can fix it. And sort of just as you said, to reaching out to people, the worst they can say is no, and the best they can say is yes, and then you get a job. So I think that knowing what you believe in, knowing what you care about, and not letting somebody compromise that. And also having a vision for your program, if you're doing a program or whatever it is that you're doing, believing that you have the conviction to do it, I think is really important. But then also on the flip side of that, I think realism is an important quality as well, because we can all get very caught up in the perfection of what we think we can do. And sometimes you have to work within the system that you're in. And for example, COVID, right? All of these grand plans I had for hands-on work they're out the window because I can't have kids in the same room. So you have to be able to pivot and work with what the reality that you're given, but recognize that you can always start from somewhere and build from that. So I think those are the two things that help me. I know that's not necessarily related to the EPL program, but I think the hard work and the rigor that you'll experience in this program will help you to develop that in yourself. And so if you don't have it right now, I think you'll come out with it at the end.
I would just really emphasize networking and getting to know as many people as possible. I think is really important in how I got to where I am, and really where you all can go, and what you can do now to get ready for your next role. I would also really encourage you to really reflect about what is it about education that you want to improve, and get really specific. So when I started thinking about this, I knew I wanted to do K-12 policy. I was not interested in early childhood education because I didn't really understand it. Higher ed, I don't want to deal with loans and student debt forgiveness. Like, that's not my thing. But K through 12 is what I taught, is what I wanted to do. But that's really big. And so I had to reflect about what is it about K through 12 education that I wanted to really focus and really improve. And that's what got me to thinking about creating affirming, equitable, and inclusive spaces for LGBTQ youth. I thought about those students that I taught when I was in the classroom. I thought about my own experience as an out educator, and that area is something I know is still a big need at all levels of education, and it's really helped me kind of target and think specifically about future roles, about my own work now, and really thinking about where I fit into this.
I would just say, in terms of also like valuing yourself, value your time, especially if you're a mom or a wife or a dad or taking care of someone. I had a barrage of those roles. Part of the reason that I had to switch to online, because I needed to be home. But take the time to take the program seriously and give yourself the time to do the work, because it will get intense. There will be moments where your weeks are a little heavy. And I think if you start in the beginning, when the courses are lighting, of setting aside that time and devoting that time, like I had to tell the people in my house, like, hey, I'm in school, so like I need everybody to give me a moment, and you can't run in here and ask me for something and no, I can't do this. But that was also me in terms of my own time management, of making sure that the things I needed to do, like if dinner needed to be cooked and, you know, people needed to be bathed, like that was all taking place as well. So I would just say, like, one, time management is huge, but also like really know what you want to do before you do it, because this isn't like undergrad. It's very focused. And so take a look at the program, look at the coursework, and see if it aligns with where you want to be, because there are tons of programs out there. And obviously, you know, we're advocates of AU, but you're going to spend money on this and you're going to spend a lot of time on it. And you want to make sure that it's something that's going to help you in the long run. And it doesn't just become something you did or something that, you know, you look back on and you can't really use. So those would be my two things. Like, definitely look at the coursework and the different tracks, because there are a lot of different opportunities and ways to go. Do you want to do policy? Do you want to do leadership? You know, make sure you know that before you go in so that you can navigate the system and network and do all those things as best, because you're getting to the people that are going to get you where you want to go.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and jump to Q&A. Before we do, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to our panelists. I have enjoyed hearing your responses and the advice you have for our current and prospective students. I mean, career is something that you can never start too early on, right? Like, you always want to start thinking about that end goal, especially when you're considering graduate school. You know, is this program getting me to where I am? So thank you all so much. So now we're going to open Q&A. So I do invite, you know, attendees on the call to unmute yourself, say hello, no pressure. We have the chat. I know I do have a few questions that I get started on, but definitely if you want to unmute yourself and ask something, please don't be afraid to do so. So the first question we got was from a current student, Joseph. He asked, when we think about the progression of education over the next 5 to 10 years, what should be a high priority focus for schools and districts?
Really great question. And I think I would alter it, and I think what I'm about to say should be also thought about now. But I would say it's probably going to take the next 5 to 10 years to really implement. But I think two things. One, I think schools and districts both should take a racial equity and racial injustice lens to everything that they're doing, and really dissect what they are perpetuating with their students and with their teachers and how they need to improve. Montgomery County Public Schools outside of DC, they actually have a whole equity audit that they do across their district, which is really impressive. And then I think from a district perspective, I think we really need to take a close eye and really improve our resource allocation, and particularly our school funding formulas, and really seeing how we can target funds better to the students, that how we can target funding to schools so that they can better support their students.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Bettina Love, also I heard her say sometime in the last few months, like, trust the activists at your school site. And as a school leader, like, really actually lean on the organizers who are doing the work. I think when you look at leadership, it's a predominant number of white women in leadership roles at school sites, at district levels or charter organizations, and how we're deconstructing that and how we are putting an eye towards that. And putting that back in the hands of, like, the actual grassroots organizers that are doing the work that we want our students to be reflective in. And I also think similarly with school funding, like, you know, for my own school budget, like, we're projecting a 10% cut to local control funding formulas in California. And it is having an adverse effect on what we're projecting and what we're expecting. And I think a lot of, you know, at a teacher level, like, it doesn't necessarily come to mind every single day when I'm in a classroom with my 5th graders. But as a principal, it certainly comes to mind about how budget projections are being made, who's working in what capacity at a federal level that dictates what a state budget looks like, and putting that back in the hands of teachers and families to actually be the ones to advocate for what they need. And it's really challenging because a lot of that time in this role alone in the last few months been really held in my role, or as with principals, and trying to think about ways you can push school leaders to be more transparent and really show up as a collective front to not just a district or organization, but to state legislators, and what that means for school funding too.
Thank you. So another question we have is they're asking for your perspective on the value of getting a teaching license or certificate versus getting the education, policy, and leadership master's degree.
So I will say, I think that depends on where you teach, first and foremost, because some states will require you to have a certification or some type of license regardless. And some states, depending on how their policy and certification goes, may supplement a master's degree because of the content. And because a lot of times when it comes to certification programs, and some master's programs, the coursework will align. So it's really important to know like where you're trying to teach and what exactly you're trying to do. Certifications are always great because, and I say this to kids too, it says that you're good in whatever you're doing, and it's specific usually, unless you're in lower level. So like elementary is usually general content, but once you get to middle school, you'll have to select a content area. But it really just depends on where you're trying to teach and what you're trying to do. If you're not trying to teach long-term, because there are people that use education, you know, as an opportunity to go into policy or other things like that, then that may be something to consider. But this program has a lot of breadth. So I think even if you got a certification, because I have my license, I'm a certified teacher, but I also got the program, I think it opens up a lot of doors. So it's really just, what do you want to do? And what type of path do you think would be best for where you want to go?
And I would echo that and just say I'm still unlicensed and I will remain so because I work in independent schools. And so there's also a whole other world, you know, K-12 education is also private, independent, whatever you want to call it. I feel like we keep moving the name on that. But and I think most of the training that I received on the job was maybe equivalent to doing sort of, you know, a teaching practice right at the end of a master's degree, right? That first year is a lot of trial by fire, but if you make it through, you really know what you're doing. You don't learn anything unless you're in the classroom, unfortunately. It's hard to learn from a book, you got to go do it. And I think that if you're looking at the policy leadership track, you probably are more inclined to not be a full-time teacher forever. Certainly some people will remain so, but I do think that it lends itself to people who are looking for another or additional avenue. And so I think that might just be a situation we might have to kind of do a little soul searching and say, you know, do I want to be a teacher leader, or do I want to be a school leader or a policy leader? Because they are kind of two parallel but separate tracks. And I think it may be hard to cross path too much. But don't get too worried about not having a certification. There are jobs out there. You are employable.
Thank you. Next question is, what most has surprised you about your experience at AU? Did any of those surprises at you on a different course from what you expected?
I think this is a little specific to AU, but also I think can be said about the education policy world in general. But I was very surprised by how small this world is. So thinking about going back to conversations I had with professors and getting networks to different individuals, I'm still hearing about my professors' names in a variety of different ways. Usually nothing to do with AU, just because it's the education policy world and it's a very small world, which is ultimately a good thing for networking and for building relationships.
I would say too, I think I was surprised by the breadth of the professors and their footholds in the educational community. In one of my classes, we literally were speaking to a different CEO of like major education corporations every week. And I was just wowed by the fact that I was even able to sit and be in an intimate setting with someone. I mean, we're talking to like the CEOs of Teach for America, we talked to somebody from Uncommon Schools, we talked to people from City Year. I mean, my professor was the former ED of City Year. And so, like, I was like, I mean, in that class, it blew my mind because every week we were speaking to people that you hear about in the news and you read about, and like you aspire to get to their level. And one, it reminded me too of how like personable people are and how we forget like they are people too. But it was just every single one of them was offering up their personal contact information, not even like the business website email, but like, no, contact me. And I reached out to several of them and they got back. So I think it speaks to the level of professors that are in this course. Like, you know, that a college or a university takes time to pick who they have in front of you. But this program, I mean, the breadth of knowledge and wisdom is just, it's out of this world. And some of the people you will come in contact with, especially for that class, if you take it where you have to work and contact an executive director of a company, I mean, it really helps you get into networking because you are kind of thrown into it, but to see how easy it is once you break that, your own personal wall of, you know, anxiety and fear about reaching out to someone that's kind of like on that level. And they are on that level, no air quotes, but like, you know, that was probably what really like wowed me.
You took mine, Julia, but I'll only just add in that course, like I think what shocked me was when Marriott Wright Edelman's son, who works at the Bill Gates Foundation, came and spoke to our class. Like I think that just blew my mind. And then another one, actually wasn't that same course. One of our teachers was a superintendent. This is not like, he had been fired because of like controversy, but just his ability to leverage his experience in that was helpful to us as aspiring like, you know, network leaders or district leaders. It was really helpful because he would often recount some of the stories of like, you know, community meetings and school board meetings and parents. And so the level of experience and exposure to these folks was great.
Great, thank you all. So we have room for one more question. If anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask the question or type in the chat box, we have room for one more question.
Hi, all. My name is Henry. I'm one of the participants today. Thank you so much to all of you for the really great advice and the wonderful anecdotes. I was curious if anyone might be able to comment on the apprenticeship or internship aspect, you know, of this type of program, whether it's the specific policy and leadership program or other Masters of Education options. And as long as we are in this mostly online course format, you know, what you see as the possibilities for replicating that internship experience are, and if it's worth it to still pursue this type of program while some of those options may be more limited than they had been before.
Oh, go ahead, Liz. Did you want to go?
I'll go after you.
So seeing that I like just came out of the program during Corona and the very end of my program where we do the project-based learning where I had to do a lot of it. I think it was something obviously we were all navigating as we went. And so that pro seminar class was very interesting because and I think one, you have to understand that like you're gonna be in a cohort with people depending on how you do it. So if you do it in person, obviously everyone's local, but for online, like I was in a cohort with people that were literally across the country. Like one of my classmates was literally in Cali, right? And so I think that the team learned a lot, and then talking to my professors within the year, they learned a lot during this time of how to navigate this, both for people that would have been doing the traditional program and are going to be currently online until it goes back, or people that choose to do online all the way through. I would say that I think though in the world that we live in, it is important to learn how to navigate those spaces online, because a lot of companies in this time have realized the value of working from home and teleworking. And so I do see that even when we do return to what, you know, normal living will be like, that a lot of companies will be allowing their employees to take advantage of the opportunities to telework and might be teleworking more as a whole. Like a lot of the major corporations, like I know my mom, one of her friends works for the government. They told her they're not going back until like the middle of next year. And that's if everything clears up, right? So like her company is going to be navigating all of their internships with their policy interns and things like that virtually. And I think it's actually a great time to be in a program like this because you're kind of learning on hand how to work through something that other people haven't worked through before. And it'll give you a resilience that I think will really turn out well for you when you're going to reach that next level of whatever you're doing. Like I know that by the way that I powered through the last month of, you know, the last semester of the program because of everything that went on, not that I felt invincible, but it did give me a feeling of like, I can handle this because we had to navigate so many things. And so I encourage you to kind of push yourself if it's something you're on the fence with. It's not going to feel the same as probably, and if you're more with in-person stuff that might feel uncomfortable, I say push yourself and really see what's out there because you never know when it could flip, what could happen. And this is you're going to learn a unique set of skills in this kind of environment that you'll be able to take no matter where you go.
Yeah, I agree. And
Henry, go ahead, Liz.
Sorry, it's hard to.
You're fine.
Here's our challenge. How do you do this virtually? I was gonna say I did the program online, and so my perspective is a little bit different because our pro seminar was set up to be virtual because it was never meant to be anything else. And I never felt like I missed out on anything. I feel like I got the full experience. I worked with a national organization of school administrators, and I did a whole bunch of research for them on school discipline and school mental health. And I worked with one of my cohort members who was in New Hampshire, and it didn't feel like we weren't in the same room. I mean, there were often times that we would get on Zoom and we'd have a Google Doc in front of us and we would just talk like we were in the same room. And I think what was so valuable about that is it made me both a better collaborator and a better teacher, because I'm using skills that I had to employ as a student in this program as a teacher now, because I'm teaching virtually. So I actually think back on that and I'm like, how did we do that when I was doing this? And can I apply that to my students now? So it's set up to work. They thought it through. It does work. And it also gives you some really interesting perspective. So I say go for it. I don't think you'll feel any different. And I don't think that you will feel left out in any way.
Great. Thank you all so much. So that concludes the end of our time together. I just want to say again, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. It has been such a joy to hear your responses, your advice. Also great to see some of you, Julia, so great to see you and hear updates about your life. I'm so excited for you. And congratulations again on your acceptance to your PhD program. That is amazing. But yes, thank you all so much and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.